This is Hannibal here from the Hannibal TV on YouTube, and today I have a returning guest, one of my favorite personalities in the UFO domain. She's a prominent researcher, journalist, and content creator known for her extensive work in exploring unidentified aerial phenomena and related mysteries. None other than Cristina Gomez. How are you today?
Hi, I'm doing so well. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. I like the braid that you have going there.
Thank you. I like your eye for detail, Devin.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So, what is the latest in the world of UFOs? Anna Paulina Luna, I believe it was last week, we got news about this disclosure task force. And I guess second on the list after JFK is going to be UAPs.
That's right. So, just a few weeks ago, Representative Anna Paulina Luna had made public that she created a task force called the Declassification of Federal Secrets. And it's covering a handful of different things like the JFK assassinations, MLK Jr., a few others. But obviously, one that caught my attention the most, since what I focus on is UFOs, is her attempt to declassify information regarding UFOs and USOs, which are UFOs that come out of the water. And while there hasn't been a lot of information that has come forward as of yet, she already has a track record behind her. She was present at the latest two UFO congressional hearings, the one in July of 2023 with David Grush, and then the more recent one that took place with Gallaudet, Elizondo, Schellenberger, and Gold. And she has been very vocal about her interest in this topic, that she doesn't want a lot of these just kind of like witness testimonies and hearsay and stories, but she's really attempting to dive in and collect the data, collect the paperwork to back up these claims, especially the ones that Grush made in July of 2023, that we have reverse engineering programs, that we are in possession of non-human biologics and things like this. We all of us, and I think we can all agree with Miss Luna here, that we all want the data. We all want the paperwork to back up these claims, because a story is a beautiful story, but that's all it is. And also, what's interesting here is that she had already made her team public on who's going to be a part of it. And the majority of them, there's seven, five out of the seven have shown a public interest in UFOs. These include Nancy Mace, who was the chairwoman of the latest hearing. Of course, Tim Burchett, who has been in the front line since the very beginning when we had our very first UFO hearing, the AOI MSG in 2022 with Scott Bray and Donald Moultrie. That was a train wreck of a hearing, but there hadn't been one prior to give a foundation. So I guess that's kind of where we can let it slide. But that particular hearing, I think, paid it forward for the latest two that we got. But Tim Burchett was there at that one. He was sitting in the audience, and he was so furious. He was like, that was the worst hearing I've ever been to. They're just lying to you. It's absolute BS. So much so that he ended up becoming, panel, like a part of the panel for the last two congressional hearings, asking, I would genuinely say, very good questions, very hardball questions, and ones that he wanted very straight answers to. He's also been a part of a lot of interviews and things like this where he has spoken about that there's a lot more to this, but the stance that this task force is taking, and that Anna Paulina Luna and Tim Burchett have been mentioning since the very beginning, and we really need to emphasize this, is that it's not about the little green men. It's about the paper trail. Where is the money going for all of these projects, offices, programs, and things like this? And while it might be an eye roll for so many, I get it. Like, oh, come on, money. It's when you're able to actually follow that paper trail, there is data to back that up. You're able to find the locations and the people involved. hopefully, right? And then you'll be able to get the actual answers that you're looking for. But the best way to go about this is say, oh, it's about the money, when in reality, it might not entirely be the case. So, this latest creation of the task force is going to be interesting on how it progresses. They're already moving the ball forward, to my knowledge. That has been public information that they're kind of already getting started. She already announced her team on the, I believe it was last week that she announced everyone that was going to be a part of it. So it was Nancy Mace, Tim Burchett, along with Lowen Boebert, who I didn't know about her until she was a part of the latest congressional hearing, where she was asking a lot of questions pertaining to USOs and underwater bases, which were great, but she did not get very coherent answers. And her intro to that congressional hearing, I don't think benefited her in any way. The only downfall to this task force that I think people will definitely notice is that it is the whole panel is Republican. It would have been nice to see there's a bit more diversity with this, but regardless of that, this is a bipartisan issue. We have seen both Republicans and Democrats show a public interest in this. Some Democrats include Jared Moskowitz and Chuck Schumer with the Schumer Rounds Amendment that was kind of infiltrated into the latest NDAA, but a lot of it was stripped. But it's nice to see that it doesn't matter where you lean in the political party. We all have an interest in this. So that's exciting. And I would really like to see how this is going to continue to unfold and what information the new task force can bring forward pertaining to UFOs and USOs and what they find.
Why do you think that they're going to declassify the JFK stuff before getting to the UAP? Is it just because it's simpler? Because to me, it seems like UAP is a bit more of a pressing issue. It's not something from decades ago that probably isn't going to affect the future of humanity, where to me, like UAP might actually affect the future of humanity.
Well, if that was the case, why haven't those files been declassified sooner, right? We've all been asking these questions. Why haven't the JFK files been declassified at, years ago, decades ago? It's not something that I specialize in, so I can't really provide a lot of commentary, but something that I have mused about is I found it interesting that Anna Paulina Luna picked so many different topics for her task force to investigate these federal secrets. And I thought to myself, what if they all have an underlying foundation, all have an underlying similarity? And I haven't found what that is yet, but that's something that has caught my attention and has definitely crossed my mind as well.
You mentioned that Nancy Mace is going to be part of this task force. I did hear her on two different podcasts in November and January when talking about the drones, saying that there was two types of drones that in meetings she attended with the government, they couldn't figure out. Has it come out since then that yes, even those ones were these FAA approved drones, or do you know anything about these types that supposedly may have been more orb-like-ish or weird shapes that they couldn't actually figure out?
The mysterious drone incursion is a lot more convoluted than what the media gives it credit for. These have been seen since Thanksgiving weekend in November. They were seen practically every single night for weeks leading up until months. They're still being seen today, but not at the same frequency. And the F the FAA, the FBI, the Pentagon, the DoD let that story sit for about 3 weeks. So they're like, we don't know what these things are. We don't know what these people are seeing. There was a drone hearing, and there was a person, a part of the Department of Justice, a person from the FBI. And they're like, yeah, we don't know what's going on. And then on December 17th, we got this official report that, like, hey guys, actually, sorry to break it to you, but it's ours. These were FAA approved operations, and you shouldn't worry about it. But the witness testimony doesn't really add up to that conclusion. People had mentioned in New Jersey, and it's also been seen in New York, by the way, and internationally, but we'll keep that just for a little bit later, that They have seen some of these objects shapeshift. Some of them make noise, some of them don't. People have attempted to fly their drones up to these objects in the sky, and their batteries would immediately drain out, which there is a very interesting correlation between battery drainage and the UFO phenomenon, along with the paranormal phenomenon as well. And then the story very, very quickly got brushed to the side when we got this conclusion of, come on, guys, they're drones. The FBI and the DOD have finally addressed this. But there were allegedly, right? We don't have all the paperwork for all of it. Were some drone hearings behind closed doors, like you had mentioned that Nancy Mace was a part of and made commentary on. There's a lot more going on. I think that there could be a flurry of different things. Maybe some of them really are ours and some of them aren't. But looking at New Jersey, for instance, there is a Lockheed Martin facility that does specialize in drone operations. Another one is in Colorado, which, funny enough, Colorado had their own drone incursion in December of 2019 into January of 2020. That story came and left so quickly, and it wasn't remembered until this latest incursion that started a little late last year. And when we get these conclusions, that's when people no longer show an interest. But these conclusions aren't always necessarily true. The best example of this is Roswell. So we know it took place in 1947. It was written off as a flying saucer. The very next day, the RAAF said, actually, no, sorry, it's not that. We're investigating it. It's Project Mogul. And then years later, they're like, actually, no, it's Project High Dive, where we had these dummies and we were just kind of seeing how this all plays out. We're seeing that same pattern, that same blueprint with this latest incident that has been taking place in New Jersey and the entire East Coast, along with places like Denmark and Germany as well, just to name a few, and England also. There have been other reports internationally, but they haven't really made US news. However, it is important to keep our eye on these kinds of cases, and a really good place to do that is on ufonews.co. That keeps everyone up to date on international UFO news. It's a very good website that I created, and I also write articles on there as well.
And that's a different one than your strange paradigms one.
Yeah, so ufonews.co is an aggregate website. So whenever UFO is mentioned in the news, it shows up there. My strange news website, that's just kind of like my stuff. Nothing really as interesting as ufonews.co.
Cool. Well, thanks for clarifying that. As far as your personal opinion on the whole mystery drone situation, what's your theory on what exactly happened there?
It's a mixture of things. Looking at this, hearing the witness testimony, seeing how the New Jersey Sheriff Department showed a genuine concern in this, when we got the answers from the Pentagon that these are not a threat, the one of the head sheriffs of New Jersey uh, wrote an official response to that response by the Pentagon stating, no, this is a threat. We're scared. Our people are scared. We don't know what's going on. No one's giving us answers. And we don't have the proper equipment, like drone interception equipment, to bring these objects down. When the FBI did their investigation immediately after these objects were seen in the sky, there have been no reports of them using drone interception technology, which we are in possession of. And there's also going to be a new one called Project Meteor, which will be launched in 2026 by the Navy, of more powerful drone interception tech. That's also public knowledge. But there's a lot of holes in this story. And again, just looking at Roswell, for instance, which we didn't really hear about this case again until Stanton Freeman, the guy behind me, brought it up in 1978. That they were so good at brushing off Roswell, the most famous case that we classify today as like the changer for the UFO phenomenon. It wasn't looked at again until 1978. That same kind of thing could happen with these latest sightings in New Jersey, where now no one's talking about it, but a few decades down the line, there might be a more in-depth investigation where they're like, whoa, this was not FAA approved. There's a lot to this.
What did you think about Trump initially saying before he was actually in power that he was going to release the files on drones? Then, after he got in power, he originally said it was going to be the next day. Then, some time went by. He kind of brushed it off in a few interviews. Then, they finally just released their statement, which was a very basic statement. What is your personal opinion? Do you think he found out more than he expected to find out, and and that was the reason why he just put out a basic statement rather than the whole files?
Presidential candidates have been using the "I will release UFO information" since about 2016, maybe a little before that. But during the 2016 elections, Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, and I believe Donald Trump as well, they all said, if I become president, I will release that information. None of them did, right? They just used that as a tactic because it is a bipartisan issue. And then Trump said, okay, as soon as I get into office, I'll release this. And yes, we were all left hanging out to dry. We're like, okay, Mr. Trump, why don't you give us the goods? Like, what's going on? And then about a week or so later, the Pentagon spokesman, Caroline Leavitt, her explanation was 30 seconds long. And it was a very strange 30 seconds because she had stated that these were FAA approved, doing investigations, and other reasons. We don't know what those reasons are. And then she ended her 30-second conclusion with, they are not the enemy. In the previous administration, the Biden administration, Pentagon spokesman John Kirby and Sabrina Singh said they're not ours, they're not foreign adversary, and that was that. So we didn't really have an answer as to what they were. Then we get this new administration and we're getting a different answer. No one's agreeing with each other, which I think that in itself should be a red flag. Because the two administrations, if they had the information, should have given the same answer, but they didn't. I wish people would grab onto that. It's jarring to look at.
Definitely. And as far as Anna Paulina Luna's task force that we were talking about earlier, what do you think disclosure would look like from her? Would it be something basic like, yes, non human intelligence does exist and has been visiting us for a while? Or would it be just declassifying certain documents that would make it really obvious that we're being visited? Or what do you think?
I think it'd be the latter there, Devin. When we're dealing with the government, it doesn't matter where their heart is. It doesn't matter, what their narrative or agenda is. They still have to follow a blueprint. They still have to follow the leader, which is disappointing, but that's just how it is. All the information, and I'm literally just guessing here because I don't know, but all of it's going to have to be revised beforehand, see if it clashes with any national security issues. That will always be the narrative. And then from there, I can guess a lot of documents that might surface are going to be heavily redacted, if any, or maybe might even turning into the pessimistic Christina, that we won't get any documentation about UFOs or USOs. And the underlying answer will be, there's nothing to this. Now, do I think that's actually going to happen? I hope not. I really don't. But looking at previous administrations, previous offices, that is how it has been turning out. There were a lot of hopes for the Aero office, where Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick was the chief of before he resigned in December of 2023, and we got nothing. And then same with the UAPTF. The original reports, classified as preliminary reports, they were incredibly late. They were much later than when they told the media they're going to be dropped on this day. Instead, they were usually dropped on a Friday where the media cycle's already closed up for the weekend. And most people didn't even know that it dropped until you ran over to Twitter. And when those took place in 2022, 2023, into 2024 as well, we got preliminary reports from the UAPTF and Arrow, and then we got the Volume 1 report from Arrow. Baby, where's Volume 2? We haven't even gotten that yet, even though we now have a new director of Arrow, Dr. John Kozlowski, which nobody knew anything about him until he showed up to his hearing with Kirsten Gillibrand talking about his Arrow report that he released just a few days before that hearing. We only had, you could only, during that time, you could only find one picture of him, his professional formal picture. Other than that, there was hardly any information, minus his like educational background, like what he specializes in. Similar to Dr. John Kirkpatrick. And then when he was a part of office, he wrote that paper with Harvard professor Avi Loeb, hypothesizing that some of these motherships in space could be dropping dandelion seeds, which is how they classified it, which were better described as drones, dropping onto planets, seeing if they're habitable and things like this. And not enough people grabbed onto that. Like Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick was a two-faced coin. In front of Arrow, he says, "There's nothing to see here. Everything's explainable. Actually, it's so boring. Don't ask me any questions." And then he wrote a paper with Avi Loeb hypothesizing these incredible ideas. Now, for Dr. John Kozlowski, he's given no media appearances. We saw him once and that's it. He's never shown up since. Maybe because he learned from his predecessor. He's like, Dr. Kirkpatrick got burned so bad, but he did that to himself by constantly contradicting himself in so many interviews. Kozlowski thought to himself, I'm not going to follow this man's footsteps. There is no way. However, these offices have been a disappointment. We don't know how much funding they're getting either. Their reports are lacking the data on how they got those conclusions. So with the new task force created by Anna Paulina Luna, I really hope that she looks at these previous offices and tries to hopefully tell herself, I don't want to follow the same footsteps, and I want to give the information that the people are asking for. But I don't know how it's actually going to turn out. I want to be optimistic. I am a bit optimistic, but I don't know.
We all love your voice impersonations, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Would you ever do comedy? Because I noticed that you do a lot of like comedic videos here and there as shorts.
Probably not. I don't find myself funny. I want to be. I do, but I don't think I'm funny. So no stand-up comedy for me ever.
Okay. Well, you are funny, in my opinion. As far as the Holloman Air Force Base alleged meeting between the U.S. government and visitors, what could you tell us about that? Because I only recently found out that UFOs Past, Present, and Future movie was allegedly supposed to include the landing where before this conversation allegedly happened. And the whole story is fascinating to me.
So, that particular case, the Holloman Air Force Base incident, is a remarkable one. There's a lot of moving parts to this, actually, and it's a great story, and that's what it is, because we don't have a lot of like absolute data, but it is one that I think sets a foundation for a lot of people, thinking that there is this connection or this treaty between the government and extraterrestrials, not only because of the Eisenhower Treaty, but a few other projects as well. But looking at the Holloman Air Force Base, this is a great case because it has to do with President Eisenhower, who went to Holloman Air Force Base on separate occasions, but in one in particular, he allegedly was in contact with the hook-nosed grays. He was in this craft for 45 minutes signing some paperwork while another UFO was hovering over the UFO landed on the ground. And the media brushed it off as, oh, he had a medical emergency, and that's why he wasn't able to make it to like all these different press meetings and press conferences and things like that. And that he was actually going on vacation with his secretary to go on a hunting trip. But then the story kind of turns around and he's like, well, actually, he went to Holloman Air Force Base to sign this treaty with extraterrestrials. Now, Holloman Air Force Base has had its fair share with alleged UFO sightings. And one of the better, some would classify it as a documentary, some would classify it as a movie. You can pick the straw that you want. But the one that I'm talking about and the one that Devin had just mentioned is the movie called Past, Present, and Future, created by Robert Emenegger. I love his last name. It just rolls off the tongue so nicely. But if you see it on paper, you're like, whoa, that is way too many letters in there. But in that movie slash documentary, however you want to address it, he gave interviews years later talking about the whole process of how that movie was made, where the FBI was involved, the Air Force was involved, I believe NASA was involved as well, in order to give him accurate information. And he had some people on the inside. And what Robert Emenegger had mentioned in an interview, he had stated that him and his team, Emenegger's team, were promised to get the actual footage of the hook-nosed grays landing in and around Holloman Air Force Base to put in their movie. They were able to go into the Pentagon. They were able to kind of shuffle through the archives, read the paperwork on the incident, but I don't think they could take any of it home. They could only read it there. And then right before the movie was going to be released, Emenegger said, okay, I really need that footage before I finish up this movie. Can you hand it over to me, Mr. Pentagon smoking man official? I don't know who you are, but you're definitely a cutthroat character. And then the Pentagon, they back out last minute, according to Emenegger, and they never gave him the footage that they promised him. So instead, in the movie, there are just artist renditions of what took place. It's a very interesting movie. I think it's worth watching. It fills in some of the gaps on this case on how the military handled this operation. But one of the factors that stand out the most is how much the military and the government had such a heavy hand on that movie. And then it doesn't talk too much about Eisenhower and his situation, but the Eisenhower Treaty is believed to have been signed by the Hook-Nosed Grays, where Eisenhower agreed, allegedly, that in return for advanced alien technology, those beings could abduct people and cattle a certain amount a year, and that would be like a fair trade. Now, there have been a lot of flaws in this. People always bring up the argument, I see it so often, of if these guys are so advanced, why do they need to ask to do these abductions? And I'm like, you know what? No, that's a valid question. I get it. But you know what? Maybe they have a sense of morality. Okay? Maybe they actually care. They probably don't. Also, there are these ideas that if they were to ask for permission, there wouldn't be any repercussions or an investigation done into these situations of cattle mutilations and people going missing. Versus if the military didn't know anything about it, then it would be a full-blown operation. That's my assumption here, right? So that's one idea that uh, people usually in the comments don't address, but I think we should on that one.
I recently
My voice just
saw,
cracked too.
yeah, I did. I recently saw an interview with Jim Semivan where he was asked by James from Engaging the Phenomenon if an incident like that could have occurred. And of course, Jim Semivan, former CIA guy for 25 years, and he said he definitely, in his opinion, thinks that some meeting and some sort of agreement likely occurred. So, do you think something occurred? Not necessarily there, but in all likelihood, what, in your opinion, do you think of that?
I don't see why not. Imagine if you were the chosen one, right? So you're doing your job, you're doing your job in the government, and some guy walks in. He has a coffee in one hand, a cigarette in the other. And he walks in. He's like, "Hey, I need to speak to you." And you're like, "Yes, sir. What is it?" "You're gonna have a meeting with aliens." Oh my gosh, I'd be on top of the world. I would immediately drink a Red Bull and I would have wings. I would just fly over there, be like, "Yes, I am the chosen one." That'd be amazing. Now, has that actually happened in the sense of these meetings have taken place? There have been a lot of stories, and I think one that would be worth mentioning would be like the Dulce Base incident, where you had multiple people that have come forward that have stated that they were either involved, like this one security guy said he was a part of the Dulce Base. There were multiple levels where there was this kind of alliance between humans and extraterrestrials. And then you had Phil Schneider, who had also spoken out about this as well before his passing. He did a lot of conferences and stuff, and he had stated that he was in this war between scientists and extraterrestrials. Something happened, and a lot of people died. But that's just one example of alleged examples of several to where there is this alliance between humans and extraterrestrials. And I think in some ways, it would only make sense. Like especially if you're sharing a planet or if you're sharing an agenda, you want to be with like-minded people and to kind of have this same pathway, the same journey on how to get the things that you want, versus having them as your enemy. Imagine how dangerous that would be. There have been so many people I've mentioned, if they were dangerous, they would have killed us forever ago. So maybe that's why there wasn't an alliance to begin with. Be like, guys, no, I know we're not the best, but don't hurt us. We'll agree to your terms and conditions. And that's why there's so many meetings. I don't know, but that I think is a possibility.
Jim Semivan actually said in that same interview he thinks it's the phenomenon itself that don't want to be revealed, and that's why no country has revealed them yet. What do you think about that? And do you think that they don't want to be revealed because they could, in theory, easily reveal themselves?
I think that would then imply that the phenomenon has like some form of living consciousness, right? If it's not necessarily an entity, but just the phenomenon as a whole, that's remarkable. I think it's something that all of us want the answer to if that is the case. But you're right. If they wanted to show the world that they exist, they could have done that forever ago. Or maybe they're just waiting for the right time for when they think humanity is ready for those answers. Or they're being put in a box like Pandora's box for instance, and it just takes one little peek for it to explode out. There are a lot of theories onto that question, and I think that we might maybe even be following a very specific timeline for when the moment is ready and at its peak. That's when we'll know. And hopefully it will benefit our civilization versus deteriorate it.
What do you think about Jeremy Corbell's recent claim in the Tubi documentary that he did, I think with TMZ, that supposedly there's going to be some fake alien invasion mothership operation put on by the government in the next few years, and he it seems like a lot of people are saying that's the thing that's going to happen within 2 years. It's various people like Lou Elizondo and even Nick Pope have alluded to, but in recent weeks and months, Lou Elizondo seems to have backed off on that claim a little bit, that something big is going to happen in the next few years.
There has been that narrative for quite some time on both on both halves of the spectrum. One stating that something big is going to happen, it's going to change humanity, it's going to change everything, it's going to be incredible. And then the other half of something big is going to happen, but it's not going to be real, it's going to be a part of Project Bluebeam. There's both. And maybe that is by design. The more convoluted this topic is, the more people are fighting amongst themselves. That's the best place. That is when it's the best time to reveal everything, when no one's paying attention or when they're bickering amongst themselves, right? Is it going to be Project Bluebeam? A lot of people thought that the mysterious drone incursions in New Jersey were a part of Project Bluebeam, and others don't. I personally don't think it was. But this one is going to take place in maybe 2026. Could that be? How did they get that information? Where did they find that handbook if it was Project Bluebeam? Or did someone just infiltrate that little detail into the media for it to spread like wildfire? That's one of the best it's one of the best ways to create a fake rumor is just to give one person information and then allow it to spread and create its whole own phenomenon. So when I hear information like that, it does make me a little nervous in the sense of not because of what's going to happen, but how did they get that information and who originally released it?
Someone was asking about this Skywatcher team with Jacob Barber. That whole Ross Coulthart interview with Barber came out with this egg-shaped alleged UAP. What do you make of all of that?
It's timely. I'll state that. I think it's very timely in the sense of over the last few months, we've been receiving a lot more UFO news and information and hype, which I'm not disappointed about. And then for Jake Barber to come forward and also make some claims, I'm like, whoa. Either he came from his own accord to give this information, or he was nudged to do so. And a good example of this, for just to provide something for you, is during the 2023 congressional hearing, David Fravor, the guy who saw the Tic Tac in the early 2000s, said in the hearing, I didn't really want to do this. I was nudged. I kept being asked to be here. So that's why I'm here, because I have a story to tell and things like this. We can guess similar stuff have happened to previous people that have spoken out about UFOs, that they were just kind of like nudged, either for all the right reasons or all the wrong reasons. That's for you to make up your own mind. But for someone just to come out from their very comfortable home with their beautiful family and say, you know what? Now it's time to tell the world about what I know and bring on the consequences. It takes a lot, I mean, more than just courage to do that. I mean, Grush, for instance, he had his home broken into. He's had threatening calls, emails, and interactions. He has been ripped apart by the internet. Lou Elizondo as well. These are just a few examples of a few people.
Can we get a
Bob
Lou
Lazar had some
Elizondo
similar incidents.
impression? I don't want to
Oh,
digress, but can we get a Lou Elizondo impression?
I've never done one, so I'm not. I don't have one in the back of my head. I can't even
He
do
likes to say
impressions.
patriot and conversation a lot.
Well, and no, I just can't do it. I'm just not good at it.
Sorry for interrupting you there.
Now I lost my train of thought.
Well, you were
But now
talking
wait.
about everyone with David Grush and like the
Ah,
Elizondo, like the pushback when you come out about something like that.
gotcha. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that for filling in those gaps for me because I was like, wait, hold on. Right. So the consequences have been very dire for these people. I think it just took a little bit of a nudge for a lot of them to come forward and to share their information or what they can address without infringing on any NDAs. And so then for Jake Barber to do the same, if we just look at David Grush or Lou Elizondo as a foundation, people want to be in the background. They're like, no, I saw how y'all were treated. I don't want to be in that same predicament. But Jake Barber, came forward. And I'm like, oh, that's very interesting. And also his statements on X of when Caroline Levitt made the statement of these objects in the sky, these drones, are not the enemy. Jake Barber made a comment stating, I've had people on the inside and they have told me otherwise. So it's like, oh, who do you believe? It's if you sit back and you just watch it as a whole, it's like you're watching reality television of like who's really telling the truth here, or is it all just fun drama?
As far as Jake Barber, what do you think of the whole psionics claim and the summoning of UFOs and being able to control UFOs? Do you think we're going to see some proof of this?
My question to you then would be, do you think CE5 would be proof of that, Devin?
I haven't seen enough evidence of CE5 personally to be able to confirm it. I know there's some credible people that have discussed it, but to me, I'm not quite convinced of it yet.
No, I definitely hear what you mean. I have mixed feelings about CE5 as a whole. However, if we look at ancient teachings, if we look at shamans across India, across a native, like Native American tribes in the United States, or even native tribes in South America and other parts of the world, there have been these medicine men, these shamans, these chiefs that are able to go into a meditative state and connect with either their ancestors or beings from the sky, the star people. CE5, I think, has, is kind of similar to that. So that could that lay a foundation for what Jake Barber had mentioned previously? That's also something for people to make up their own mind on. I've never done CE5, so I cannot provide a personal opinion on that. But just merely looking at the legends and the folklore of being able to connect with these beings and even with these craft, and also the tests done by the CIA in the 70s of Project Stargate, where they were doing remote viewing and other things, it kind of lines up.
And of course, Stephen Greer has popularized CE5. Was Jacob Barber the guy Greer was talking about when in like early January he was saying he was going to have pretty much disclosure in a few weeks, and then it turns out that the only thing that really happened was Coltart interviewed Jacob Barber, and I guess he's associated with Greer somehow. Is that pretty much what the announcement was from what you gather of it all?
If it was, then it aligned perfectly with what Greer had mentioned. If it didn't, then that's a great grab to say, I did that. Um, Jake Barber has never mentioned Stephen Greer, and Stephen Greer has never publicly mentioned Jake Barber's name. So that's just kind of an assumption of like, did he already see that coming, or did he just grab onto that was his achievement? I don't. I can't tell.
As far as the USOs and UFOs, they seem to be for this new task force investigating them and disclosing them in two separate groups. Would you say that it could be two different things, or what's your opinion on what's going on with unidentified aerial phenomena and unidentified submerged phenomena?
Well, from what we know already about UFOs, they are transmedium objects. They're able to go into space and into the air, no problem. So probably those same objects can also go into the water as well. So it might just be just kind of like one craft doing all this amazing stuff. Something that I would like to see the new task force investigate are the underwater bases, because to our knowledge, right now, only 10-15% of our oceans have been explored and scanned and understood, leaving such a wide amount of our planet, really, because Earth is a water world. It's just dominated by water, and for so much of it not to be fully explored is already shocking in itself. But our equipment is limited, even in 2025, which I find very strange. I A few days ago, I was sitting at home looking at all of my ugly wires, connecting all of my technology, and I thought, we're living in the literal future. and we're still using wires, and the wires are it's a whole waterfall of wires going down. I'm thinking we are so behind technologically for 2025. So if we don't have the proper technology to fully use equipment, submarines, and even like sonar data, it only goes so far deep, or it could only handle so much pressure. For me, I find that shocking that we just haven't really cracked the code there yet. So that's a great place to have underwater bases for these beings that are not entirely human to hide if they are able to access or create that kind of technology. And also, what's strange is that there have been people have mentioned that we have explored more of our own space, like outer space, than we have our oceans. Doesn't that does that sit right with you, Devin?
Yeah, it seems a little unusual. What would you think an underwater base would look like? Do you think this is just like somewhere they would refuel or stay temporarily, or could this be more of a world where they could actually stay in for a while?
Now you're putting on my sci-fi author hat on, because I thought about. I think all of us have thought about these things. Also, movies are very helpful as well, right? And books. But why can't it be all of the above? Where it's not only a place to actually live and go undetected, but also a place to refuel as well, to where they're minding their own business in space and they come home to be their home, right? Or their little gas station, their little gas pit, pit stop. And they just quickly go in and out. Wouldn't it be so nice to be surrounded by so many fish and marine life, but the deeper you go, the more alien it looks. So they just probably feel like they're back on their home planet. Look at that, like the most terrifying creature with the super sharp teeth, and they can just see through the absolute darkness. It's monster soup down there. It's scary, but also really exciting.
Yeah, and I just got to ask you, since you're kind of a paranormal investigator in general as well, what is your thoughts on sea monsters or Loch Ness monster type creatures?
About Loch Ness Monster, that place has a that creature and that location has a very special place in my heart. When I was younger, I used to live in Ireland, and Scotland's just right next door. So I told my dad, I was like, Dad, I really want to see the Loch Ness Monster. Can we go? And he's like, no problem. So we go to Scotland and we go to the Loch Ness, and I had my camera ready. I was ready to be the discoverer of the Loch Ness Monster. Sat there about 20 minutes and I was just bored out of my mind. There was nothing there. And then some random Scottish man invites me and my dad to his boat to eat some oysters. And I'm like, I don't know who you are. You're an absolute stranger. And that was the first and last time I've ever had oysters in my life. And I never saw the Loch Ness Monster. It's pretty sad.
Yeah, and I would imagine with everyone with cell phone cameras now, there'd be more evidence of something like that if it was to exist.
There have been a few. Okay. So the Loch Ness Monster recently, there was one, I think it's like a millionaire. He said, if you ever catch footage of Loch Ness, I will give you, several £1,000. And no one's really been able to fulfill that. There was an old couple a few years ago that they think they caught a video of the Loch Ness, but some have debunked it as just a log, which we've seen consistently with the Loch Ness. That's kind of the debunker answer of, guys, it's just a log. But with that particular video caught by this old couple, it it was moving in the water in that area, and it looked really long. I think people measured it to like 9 feet or so. So not as long as what we think the Loch Ness would be, but longer than any of your average creatures. Mine is maybe alligators, but those are not prevalent in that area. So there's that. But because we haven't received any full conclusions, and it really isn't this extreme international interest, people don't really talk about those recent findings too often.
Yeah, and in Canada, we have something called Ogopogo
Such
that's
a fun
similar
name.
to. Yeah, it's in Kelowna, BC. There has been a couple videos in recent years, but nothing substantial. But good to know your opinion on that. And what about ghosts? What could you tell us about ghosts?
Well, what do you want to know? It's just
Do
such a
you
broad
believe
question.
do you believe in them, and have you had any personal experiences?
Do I believe in something? It's not really a question of belief. People pass away, and then not all of them leave this realm. Some of them stay for a bit of time due to their attachments and their desires. And something that has been uh, talked about across religions and across cultures, where there are not only different realms, like, heaven and hell, right? But also this kind of realm for ghosts that they haven't really fully crossed over because of their attachment to maybe like money, greed, to do with not wanting to leave their family and things like this. If we look at the Mexican culture, Dia de los Muertos, it's an entire day, it could be even several days if you really want it to be, of where they go to their loved ones' graves and they give them food and water and have a good time, because that's the only day in the year where they're almost able to manifest and actually enjoy those food and drink compared to any other time of the year. That's where the veil is the thinnest. We can also see this in different cultures as well, but the one in Mexico is the one that's the most popular. People can really get a grasp on, where they're wearing, La Catrina face paints and things like this, right? Like nice outfits, really lovely. But this concept of ghosts, I know some people are like, "Oh, that's absolutely not true. It's nothing to it," but it also, I think, in some ways, gives people a level of hope that there is something beyond death that many people really struggle with, of like, I worked so hard in this lifetime. I did all of this for me and my family, and now I have to let it go. Is there really nothing on the other side? Does life not continue? So religions fill in those gaps. They give people hope of like, no, there is a heaven, there is a hell, or there is this reincarnation cycle where you will come back and you'll probably be rebirthed with that same family member that you loved so much. They'll be with you in the next one. And sometimes people just can't let go and they become ghosts. But there have been a lot of, latest equipment to really try and tap into these kinds of entities, um, to where they're able to kind of communicate with them. There have been people that claim that their third eye is open, to where they're actually able to see these other dimensions, to actually see these entities. There's ghost whisperers, right? There's psychics and all these different things. Are they all lying because it doesn't fit into your paradigm that ghosts aren't real? And there's this connection between ghosts and the paranormal and the UFO phenomenon, where a lot of these things overlap, but it's the titles that confuse us. And there's been a lot of research done by J. Allen Hynek, but also by UFO and paranormal researcher Steve Mera, to where they both found when there was a UFO sighting, paranormal things would happen in the vicinity and vice versa. Really, really interesting research.
And we've heard a lot about the connection between Bigfoot and UFOs. And you recently interviewed a guy that had an abduction experience, I guess, when he was searching for Bigfoot. What's your thoughts on the connection between Bigfoot and UFO? We also hear about them on Skinwalker Ranch, both types of entities.
For me, what catches my attention is that you can't run away from the UFO phenomenon. It's everywhere. Connected to the paranormal, connected to cryptids, to portals as well. It's very strange. So what if we're dealing with the exact same thing, but the labels are just all over the place? There has been research over the last few decades of people mentioning their UFO sightings in the forest, usually, and then a Bigfoot is right there with it. There have been ideas that, for instance, the praying mantis entities and the gray aliens have are they use the Bigfoots as slaves. And again, this is just theory. There's nothing to back this up, minus witness testimony and some sightings. But I found that really weird. Out of everything to take as your slave, you picked Bigfoot. Not only are they huge and incredibly strong to where they're able to uproot trees, these huge trees out of the ground. You know what? Maybe it wouldn't be that bad of an idea to have them as slaves until they turn on you. Then it's game over. No coming at it from that.
What do you think about the theories that supposedly extraterrestrials are able to, like when we're talking about consciousness and life after death, when they're almost about to die, they can switch their spirit into another body?
I'm sorry, I actually can't comment on that. That's a new one for me.
Oh yeah, that one's out there, so we won't go down that road. Okay, as we get to the end here, as far as the different types of aliens, I mean, there's some people that are saying there's like over 30 different races. Some are saying like 12. How many do you think there actually is that there's actual credible evidence for?
Ooh, putting me on the spot. The last question, the most difficult. I see what you're doing over here. From the reports that we have, and again, these are just unfortunate, just witness testimony and just witness testimony. There have only been a handful of reports of people mentioning different types of species, like, like I had mentioned, the grays and the mantis and the Nordics and a few others that look human. And then that kind of go from the spectrum of human looking to just absolutely not. I mean, man, I don't think I could actually handle seeing a mantis, like a 6 foot mantis creature with phalanges. I'd probably throw up everything that I had for breakfast onto the ground. I'd be terrified. Speaking of which, there have been reports of people that have allegedly been taken by these types of creatures to where they change, like they shapeshift to make them look more human or to make them look more approachable because of the panic level. If we look at contactee and researcher Whitley Strieber, he had mentioned that there have been some instances that he had been a part of and his loved ones that right before he would have an encounter, a loved one would show up first. So could that be a connection between the paranormal and UFOs, or is it this kind of coping mechanism of first I'm going to show you a hologram based off of your memories of someone that you love and trust before I show you my real self, an alien, or before I give you the information that you need to give to the world or for you to live on your own, right? That's also a very interesting theory, one that Whitley Strieber has done a lot of thinking on, some investigations on as well. So, as to how many races there are, if we look at the vast, and this sounds so cliche, look at the vastness of the universe, they're endless. But how many of them are visiting Earth? What if we're dealing with a spectrum? There might be like 12 reported, recorded ones. But what about the ones that are coming here on vacation? Because it's a beautiful planet. We got the 4 seasons, most of us, right? I mean, so many different like biodiversities. The food is pretty darn good as well. It would be a great vacation spot. And we could be dealing with so many other ones, but those ones don't really get involved.
And this is not a long question or anything, but out of a percentage, where would you put Whitley Strieber on the credibility scale? Because he says a lot of things highly credible. He obviously does a hell of a lot of research, but some of the stuff is very out there, and there might be good reason for it if he's just reporting absolutely everything.
Yeah, the things that are out there, they're only out there now because there hasn't been other people either talking about it or enough evidence as of yet. But just to bring an example into this, when the camera was first created, the first photograph, that was out there. That was terrifying. there have been stories that Native Americans would not want their picture taken because they thought that it would capture their soul and that was it for them. That that is now classified as out there. Like that's insane. That's crazy. That's not true because that means we'd all be just lifeless bodies walking around everywhere with the amount of selfies that we take. So, I think that just because a statement is out there, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong.
Yeah. The whole thing, and this might just be hard for me to grasp, is that the hybrids chain smoke because they get really nervous or something, and like a good way to spot a hybrid type alien slash human would be that they're chain smokers. But again, if anyone would know, it'd be him. But where can people follow you? I'm a big fan of yours, obviously. I'll definitely join that website. I'll make that. I think I've been searching for the wrong one, but ufonews.co. That's your main website now, I guess.
That is the one. And it is one that I use for research and then I want others to use for research as well. It's completely free. It's ad-free as well, where it is an aggregate website to find all of your international UFO news along with articles that I write based off of my research as well. That website is called ufonews.co. It's not .com, but .co. You can also find me on YouTube at Cristina Gomez, and there is no H in Cristina. Devin, thank you so much for having me on, asking such fun questions. I really enjoyed it today.
Thank you. And the best part about you is one thing about a lot of people in the UFO industry, they build stuff up even when there's nothing there. Like you're very honest. So I would tell people she's a trustworthy reporter. She's not going to waste your time with some headline and then there's actually not going to be anything credible to the report. So I appreciate all the great work you do, and I'll let you close this off with whatever you want to tell the fans.
Thank you everyone for watching and for listening. And I want to say thank you to everyone that has been following me for some time, or if you're going to be new for the first time. You're also awesome. Hit that like button right down below. That is one of the best ways to support Devin's channel on the Hannibal TV. And also subscribe. He covers some really, really cool stuff. So do those three things. Subscribe to my channel, his, and like this video.